It's amazing to remember that we never walk alone. Let me pray for a second. Father, I just want to thank you for the privilege of being able to be up here and to speak your word. But Lord, I don't want people to hear me. I want them to hear you this morning. So I pray that you will open our ears and our eyes to you and what you have to say for us, Lord, so that we can all walk out of this place different. Help me to remember what you want me to say, and help me to forget what you don't want me to say. And you be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen. This morning I want to talk to you about a very specific term that is seen in both the Gospels and the book of Acts. And it's a term that describes the followers of Jesus in the New Testament. It's a terrifying term. This term is disciple. Now, the reason that this is a terrifying term is because it's so well defined. See, we can hide behind Christianity all day long. We can go to war in the name of Christianity. We can mystify it, undefine it, redefine it. We can do whatever we want with Christianity. But I'm telling you, when you lock into the word disciple, oh my goodness. Let me give you some examples in the book of Acts. Acts 11:26 says, the disciples. Now think about the significance of that word. See, in the New Testament, if you had gone to one of the followers of Jesus and said, who am I? They would not have said Christian. They would have said, I'm a disciple. In this verse, what we see is that it was the people around them that looked and said, they're disciples. They nicknamed them Christians, little Christs. Here's another example. Acts 9:26. When he, Paul, came to Jerusalem, now remember, Paul persecuted the Christian church. He murdered people who were trying to follow Jesus. So when the people saw Paul, they thought that Paul was trying to infiltrate them. And this verse says, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was really a disciple. Acts 9:36 is another example. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. She was always doing good and helping the poor. What is a disciple? Now, the English word disciple means the same as the Greek word, and hopefully I can say this right, matheus. Did I say it right, Roger? You don't know. Okay. Good. Nobody knows. I said it right. It simply means a learner, an apprentice, a student, a follower. A disciple is a person who does this kind of behavior. I'm trying to make a decision, Jesus. What would you do? Because whatever you do, I'll do. I have this situation in my life, Jesus. How would you handle this situation? Because whatever you would do, I'll do. I have this relationship in my life. How would you deal with this relationship, Jesus? Because whatever you will do, I'll do. See, a disciple is a person who is looking to someone for direction in their life, for the way to live. And the answer to whatever the question is yes. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. What do you think about this? That's what I'm going to do. A disciple is a person who does what the person they're following is doing. It's an uncomfortable term. Now, I can see some of your faces out there, and you're going, oh my heavens. I really hope that Pastor Pat isn't about to tell us to throw out the word Christian and call ourselves disciples. I hope that's just going to be weird if she does that. And I promise you that's not what I'm about to tell you. But that's my point. It is kind of weird. You see, you can dodge the word Christianity, but you can't dodge the word or mystify and redefine the term disciple. See, the point is, we can hide behind the word Christianity all we want. Ask any Muslim. We're learning how Muslims think about Christians in Trek on a Sunday night. And what we've learned is that when you call yourself a Christian, what a Muslim hears is that you're a person who wants to kill me. But if you say, I am a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus, they're willing to listen to you and to talk with you. And let's be honest, how many people call themselves Christians in North America just because? But it doesn't change their life. It's just that they're Christian. It's a religious term. But how the disciples would have referred to themselves in the New Testament is disciple, not Christian. So this brings me to a terrifying, disturbing question that I want to ask each one of us this morning. Are we disciples, or are we just Christians? Are you a disciple of Jesus, or are you just a Christian? Are you a follower of Jesus? Is your answer yes, Jesus? Doesn't matter what you ask of me, I will do it. Yes, Jesus, I'm your disciple. I'll tell you, as I've been preparing this message, that's the question I've been asking myself. Am I a disciple, or am I just a Christian? It's been something that God has really been speaking to me about. And as I've been preparing and asking, because, when I do these messages, I probably learn more than you do. And God does more for me when I'm working on this stuff. And about just before Easter, my dad had borrowed my car. And he had taken it up to the parking lot. And he had gone in. He's a fitness freak. My 80-year-old father does spin classes 5 times a week. Puts me to shame, okay? So he had gone in and he'd been doing his exercise. He came out, and there was this woman who was putting a note on my car. She had banged into my bumper, and she was writing her name and her phone number and saying how sorry she was. And so my dad, he said, okay, no problem. And she said to him, I don't want to go through my insurance. I would just like to pay for it. So that night I get home, and my dad gives me this information. To make a long story short, I had talked to her husband, went out and got a quote, brought it back. We talked on the phone, and he says, oh, that's too much. I'm going to take it through the insurance. I said, okay, let's exchange insurance information. And he said, okay, my wife will call you with it. And I never heard from them again. And unfortunately, my insurance, I have a big deductible, so I have to pay it out of my pocket. I was angry. And I don't know if you're like me, but when I get angry, it stirs deep down inside, and it just bubbles there. And I can't sleep. And I'm just agitated, and I'm thinking of all kinds of names I'm trying to call them. And I told Bruce this story, and he knows how angry I was, And I started to talk to the Lord, and I kept praying, and I said, Lord, I don't want to be angry. What would you do, Jesus? And I didn't even mean to say that. I just went, what would you do, Jesus? And I could hear him laugh at me. Not laughing at me, but kind of, how you go, Pat, now, come on. Are you really asking me this question? And I said, yes, what would you do? He said, were you not at church on Easter weekend? And I began to think. And I remember we had watched the Sunday afternoon, the Bible thing with the movie with him being crucified. And how he was beaten up. And he didn't do anything, but they beat him up. He had every right to be angry. But he went to the cross, and what did he say? He said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then he said to me, not only did I forgive you, what did I do with your debt? And I went, you released me from my debt. I don't owe you anything. He said, then that's what I would do. So now let me be honest with you. It took me a couple of days, but I would say this over and over. I forgive her, and I will release you from your debt. And I did that for a couple of days, and the anger started to diminish, but it was still kind of there. So I finally picked up the phone, and I called. And I didn't talk to her, but I left a message on the phone, and I said to her, I said, you know, I was really angry at you because you've lied to me and you cheated me. And I said, and I will have to pay this out of my own pocket. But I said, this past Easter, Jesus reminded me that he forgave me my sins and he released me from my debt. So I want to be like him, and I will do that. And I left a message saying, I forgive you, and I release you from your debt that you owe me. And oh my goodness, the anger just went kapoofy. I couldn't believe it. I was so surprised. Let me tell you what Jesus does when you say yes to him. For the next few minutes, I just want to take you directly to a time when Jesus spoke to people who wanted to be his disciples. And he says to them, okay, if this is what you want, but here's the bottom line. I'm going to give you your very specific marching orders. And I'm going to tell you, this isn't new information to you. If you've grown up in the church, you've read this 1,000 times. If you've been here at Immanuel, you've heard Bruce talk about this many times. But if we had gotten this right, if, quote, Christians had decided to be a disciple, if we had just gotten what I'm about to read to you, this one element of Jesus' teaching, this one facet of Jesus' teaching, if we had gotten this one part of being a disciple right, there may not have been a war. And there certainly wouldn't have been a second world war. And slavery would have been abolished so much sooner if the followers of Jesus had actually followed, not the 10 Commandments, though that's good, not the whole New Testament, though that's very important, but this one teaching of Jesus, right, our world and our nation would be a better place. Here's what happened. Jesus is at the end of his ministry, and he's about to have the last Passover with his Jewish followers. And Judas has already gone to betray him, and Jesus realizes that he's running out of time, and he knows that he has to say a few things to his disciples before he's crucified and exits this planet. And in John 13:33, he says, "My children, I will be with you only a little longer." What he's saying here is, lean in here because I'm going to tell you something that's really important for you to hear. Then he goes on to say, "You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come." Now, what I find really interesting in this passage is that if you look down a few more verses, in about 36, there's Peter, who's listening to Jesus, and he pipes up and he says, "Where are you going, Jesus?" What do you mean we can't go with you? Are you taking Andrew? Because if you're taking Andrew, I'm coming. You can't leave me behind. Where are you going? Jesus, in verse 34, he goes on to say, "A new command I give you." Now that word new in Greek means unusual, strange, something you'd never thought about. A strange commandment I give you. Something you've never thought about, I give you. Now, I know that most of you know what's going to happen next, right? A new commandment I give you. What does it say next? Love one another. Love one another. Now, I can just picture John. Remember, they're sitting around a table having supper discussing these things, and they're discussing this strange commandment, this new commandment. And John goes, I can just see him saying, new? How's that new, Jesus? We've read that in the Old Testament, and you certainly talked about it many, many times in all the time we've been together. Love one another? How is that a new commandment? Jesus, he goes on to elaborate, as I have loved you, love one another. And I can picture him, and if you know me, you know my imagination goes when I'm studying the Bible. And so I'm going to take you on a little imagination story, but you can check up on my stories because I have written them in your bulletin, some of the places to go look. But I can just picture him turning to Matthew and saying, do you remember when we met, Matthew? You were a traitor. You were a tax collector. Everyone hated you. Peter, do you remember when we met Matthew? You remember how much you guys didn't even want to talk to Matthew because he was a traitor. He was a tax collector. Remember where we went with Matthew? John, do you remember? We went to his house. You remember those people he had in his house? Those kinds of people my mama taught me never to hang out with. You know, do you remember them? Do you remember the conflict between you guys and Matthew? Do you remember how we managed that conflict? Remember how I loved Matthew? That's what I want you guys to do. I want you to love one another. Nathaniel. Now, do you remember the day we met? I know you guys weren't there. The only person that is my eye that saw it was his brother. You remember? His brother went running out to Nathaniel and he said, Nathaniel, I've met the Messiah. You have to come and meet this guy. He's from Nazareth. Nathaniel, do you remember what you said? You said, Nathaniel, you said, can anything good come from Nazareth? I mean, you dissed my entire family. Do you remember how I treated you, Nathaniel? I said, come, follow me, be one of my disciples. That's how I want you to love one another. Do you remember the day when I did that vampire sermon? You know, I talked about drink my blood and eat my body. I mean, it was so weird, and people were leaving, and everybody was abandoning us. And every single one of you wanted to leave me. You wanted to fade into the crowd and be done with me. Remember that day? Do you remember how I treated you? Remember how I accepted you? How I forgave you, even though you wanted to leave me? I want you to love one another. This is what I want to characterize your relationship with each other. And then Jesus goes on in verse 35, he says, by this one thing, by this one dynamic, by this one relational breakthrough, by this will everyone know that you are my, not Christian, disciples. Wow. Doesn't that put us in a smaller category, loving each other like that? I don't know about you, but I can't get around that. I don't know how to defend that. I don't know how to exegete that. To love one another as Jesus loved us. Are you a disciple? I've asked that question of myself many times. I'm telling you, I am a very selfish person. And quite frankly, you know, we're doing this two-service thing here. We're trying it out. And there's some really exciting things that are happening in these two services. And it is exciting. And for me, it's really exciting, except if I'm really honest with you. If I'm really honest about how I'm feeling, sometimes I don't really want to get up that early to get here on time. And, when we had it at 10 o'clock, I was in here, about 7:30 in the morning. So I've been trying to even get in here earlier, for the 9:30. And part of it is because I'm a person that likes to get in and pray and get myself ready before everyone comes. But there are times I just think, do I have to do this again? And if I'm really honest with you, there are times when I'm running around doing things, and by the end of the day, I get home and I think, I sure would have liked to just have a quieter day. And then I say to Jesus, what do you want, Lord? I'm your disciple. What is it that you would have me to do? Here's my favorite part of this passage. Jesus, and I've kind of alluded to it already, Jesus has just done this big thing. Here he's saying one thing, the bottom line, the defining characteristics of the people who follow me is not how much they know about me, or what they wear on Sunday, or where they sit, or how loud they sing, or how long they pray. It's going to be all about if you love one another. This is a big deal. And here's Peter raising his hand. He probably didn't, but I picture it. He's raising his hand, and Jesus goes, yes, Peter, what's on your mind? Where are you going? I can just picture Jesus going, what? Well, yeah, Jesus, I like all the awesome things that you're saying, but where are you going? I want to know where you are going. I want to go with you. Jesus, I can just see him saying, did you miss the point of this lesson? Peter goes, yeah, but I want to go with you. I'm willing to die for you. I want to be with you on your right or on your left or behind you. You can't leave me. I want to go with you. Jesus says, Peter, look, in a few hours, a middle school girl is going to intimidate you into denying me. Peter says, no, I'm willing to die for you. And Jesus says, Peter, you don't understand. I don't want you to go with me. I don't want you to even die for me. I want you to do something even more difficult. I want you to love these guys for the rest of your life. I want you to love them in such a way that people look at your relationship, people on the outside look at your relationship, the way that you love each other, and I want them to be drawn to the edge and peer in and say, look at how they love. I want you to create a community of people who are defined and characterized by that kind of unconditional, compassionate, generous, ridiculous. Who would love that way? That kind of love. I want people on the outside to come to the edge unafraid that you're going to ask them to do something, unafraid that you're going to drag them in, unafraid that you're going to accuse them of something. I want them to be able to come to the edge of your community and be able to look and say, look at how the men treat the women. Look at how the women treat the men. Look at how they treat their widows and the sick. Look at how they even honor their children. Look at what they do with their money. Look, they're not even frightened to be persecuted. My heavens, they don't even mind dying. Look at how they love. Jesus says, I want you to go and build communities like that, and they are going to grow and expand, and they're going to grow and expand more. And people from the outside are going to be drawn to the edge. They're going to think, I don't know if I want to be like them, but I sure would want to work for them. I would hire all of them because they're such honest people. Those followers of Jesus, those disciples, they're so odd that when they mess up, they tell you before they're caught. They're generous to a fault. They're willing to do the right thing even if it costs them. I would hire all of them. I don't know if I want to be one of them, but I would like to think that someone would treat my daughter like those men treat their wives. I don't know if I want to be one of them, but I would like to think that my son would have a wife that would honor him as much as those women honor their husbands. I don't know if I want to be one of them, but I would like to know that my children are treated as kindly as they treat their children. I don't know if I want to be one of them, but look at how they love. Are you a disciple